All right, guys, we're live again. Day 2, Advanced SEO Summit, brought to you by Neil Patel. And we are super excited to announce our next session today with Yost, who is the founder of Yoast. We will introduce him in just a second. Just a couple of reminders for everyone who join in sessions. Looks like people so super excited to see you, Yost, today. But if you missed some of the content, and for those of you who are joining just now, you can always go back and review the sessions on demand. And all of them are available to you right now, but there are more to come. And I'm personally super excited about this session. I got Paul here, our partner at SEMrush, who will moderate the session and introduce Yoast in just a second. And Paul, I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to you.
Hey everyone, I'm super excited to be here. I'm reading through the comments right now and I can't believe it myself. We do have Joost de Valk. He's the co-founder of the Yoast plugin. So how many people in the room heard of Yoast or use WordPress or have a client that uses WordPress? I have. So yeah, Yoast has over 6 million installs and it's still counting. And so Joost de Valk, he's been consulting for companies like Facebook, like Odesk, Disney Interactive. And today we're bringing him on and he's going to be talking about creating how to tell Google about multi-regions and multi-language websites using Altlang. So without any further delay, I just want to let everyone know that I'll be curating and going through the questions that you have, and then I'll be asking Yoast at the end. So let's just transition to the presentation, and without any further delay, here he is.
Thanks, Paul. Now it's up for me to live up to all those comments I'm seeing, and I'm gonna make some people not so excited because I know I'm not going to be talking about the plugin all that much. We'll actually be talking about multilingual sites, and multilingual sites are something that I've been working with for 8-9 years now, on and off for both large and small web properties, and doing multilingual well is really, really one big hell. So let me introduce you to this little guy. He'll be with us in this entire presentation. And we'll be going through quite a few things, starting with what is hreflang and altlang, or whatever you want to call it. How can you use it? Which problems does it solve? Once we've done that, we'll go into some design choices that you have to make on how will you implement hreflang. Then we'll go through some of the common issues, and we'll touch on some of the useful tools that we've seen out there to make implementing hreflang somewhat easier. I'll happily share this deck later on if you want it, so don't write anything down that's on this deck because that would be a waste of your time. So let's start with what is hreflang really. And hreflang is the attribute that Google uses to serve the correct language or a regional version of a URL in the search result. That sounds like a lot of mumbo jumbo, but it basically means serve the right language version to the user based on where they are and what their language is. So what is hreflang meant for? It's meant for sites that have been fully translated. It's also meant for sites that have regional variation. Stuff like you might have an English site for Europe and an English site for the US, and you might use euros on the European site and US dollars on the US site and not have any difference, but you'd still want people to come on to the right version of the site. We've got, there's also the option of using hreflang for sites that have the template, just the template translated and not have the main content of a page translated, but I would really, really, really not suggest you do this. If you're going to do hreflang, you might as well go full pull and do it well and translate everything. If you're not going to do that, don't bother translating the template either, because it'll just look stupid and it will make people not really find anything at all. So let's say you have 3 sites, or you have one site that has 3 sections. And like this one, you've got an English site, a German site, and a Dutch site. With the code I'm showing here on the screen, you would tell Google which versions or which site to show to which people, and it would combine the rankings of all three. So if the English site would rank somewhere, like let's say the English site would rank #2 for a specific search query, but I have Dutch as a higher preference language, Google would show me the Dutch version of that page in the search results. It would replace it. So your English rankings would actually help your Dutch site at that point. So in this particular case, someone searching in Dutch would get Dutch. If you're searching with your browser set to German language, you'd get the German site. And if you're set to English, you'd get the English site. So far, it's relatively simple. Now, there's also regional variations. So let's say you've got a German site, but you have 3 different versions of it because of, well, maybe you have different stock in different countries, or you use slightly different variations of things. So you could have a German site for Germany, a German site for Austria, and a German site for Switzerland, because parts of Switzerland speak German too. So you do that this way. You give an href-lang tag with the language and then the region. And the region for Germany is the same as the language, so DE, but for Austria it would be DEAT, and for Switzerland it would be DECH. Now, what would happen in this case? If you're searching in Germany, you get the German site. If you're searching in German in Austria, you get the Austrian site. If you're searching in German in Switzerland, you'd get the Swiss site. But if you're looking at this, you might wonder, in this particular example, you might realize that a part of Belgium also speaks German. And you've now geocoded, not just language coded, but also geocoded all 3 of the versions that you're showing. So what would people searching in German in Belgium get? There would really not be an option for them at that point as to what Google would show them. So what we do is we pick one as like the main version of German, which in this case would be the German site, and we set that to just German. And then we set the Austrian one and the Swiss one to DE-AT and the Swiss one to DE/-CH. And doing this, we could differentiate. So people in Germany would still get the German site, but people in Belgium would also get the German site because there is no specific Belgian version of the site for them. There's also, to make things worse in this entire spec, a so-called xDefault. This is an href-lang tag that signals to the algorithm that if there's no page that it can go to, it should go to that page. It's used specifically for language selector pages. So if you don't have a fitting match for a person, Google would send them to that language selector page, but you can also sort of abuse it. And as Pierre Farr noted here, when I asked him last year, he said you can also push it towards the official company language page. I hate this because it makes stuff entirely complicated, but it works. So this is the setup that it was meant for. A case where there's an xDefault for the country selector page and then all the 3 languages. But you could also just do the xDefault to the German version, and then everyone would get the German version if you have no English version, for instance. So in this case, the people searching in Dutch would still get the Dutch site, etc., but someone searching in Spanish would get the country/language selector page. In this case, if we go for the German sites, then the xDefault pointing to the German one would mean that everyone who doesn't search in German but gets your site in the search results anyway would get the German site as well. So there's a couple of these things where you really should think about, okay, how many languages do I have this site in, and which areas am I targeting? And then you have to set that up well. Now, Marking that out well is relatively easy, but then comes the hard part. The hreflang spec is set up in such a way that you have to link from every page to every other language version of that page. This means that if I have 10 languages, every page links back to 9 other languages saying, okay, this is the page in German. We've also got this page in French, in Spanish, in Italian, etc. And those links would either be in the head of the page or in the HTTP headers of the page or in an XML sitemap. This is a very technical question of how do you want to do this. If you've only got a couple of languages and you're not in full control of the entire server setup, then HTML meta tags are probably the easiest ones. So you'd do something like this, and you'd add this to the meta tags of a page. This is relatively simple if you've only got a couple of languages, but one of the last sites I did a rollout of this on, we had 50 languages and a couple more regions that we served differently. So we ended up having like 65 different hreflang tags, and having 65 of these tags on a page is genuinely, well, just a lot of load to add to a page. So there's a couple of other ways that you could do this. Now, there's HTTP headers, which would not solve this, but are very useful if you want to, for instance, do hreflang for PDF documents, which is very possible, as you can see from this example. But if you really have a lot of these, then probably the XML sitemap is by far the easiest implementation. It's still a lot of work, and you'd have a URL block like this for every language version. So right now you're looking at the English page, but for the German page, you'd be linking back to the English page and the German page and the Schweizdeutsch, so the Swiss German version of this as well. It looks incredibly stupid, and that's because it is. But at the same time, it's also probably the easiest to maintain. And it doesn't really add kilobytes of load to each page load. So if you can do this and you're in full control of everything, then by all means do it like this. Have I lost you yet, Paul, or are you still with me?
No, I'm still here.
Good. So the problem with hreflang is that it breaks, and it breaks fairly often. David Sottomano, a friend of mine from the SEO community, did this chart a while back, and Google says that about 70% of hreflang implementations are broken. It's their own standard, and they're saying about 70% is broken. I think that's actually lowballing it. And I'm afraid that David is actually right on the mark here, that most people get it incredibly wrong because it's so hard to do. So there's a lot of things that can break it. So let's start with broken links and relative URLs. If you have an hreflang link that links to a broken URL somewhere, then the hreflang for those pages will not work. It used to be that if you had errors in your hreflang setup anywhere, then Google would just ignore your entire hreflang setup. They've stopped doing that recently, or they've said they've stopped doing that recently, but it still feels like it's not working when it's not like entirely perfect. If you're linking to URLs that are redirected, it won't work. If you're linking to relative URLs, so you're linking to / whatever instead of adding the full domain everywhere, it won't work. If you're missing the return link, which is something that happens fairly often. So if I'm linking from English to German saying that's the German page, but the German page is not linking back to the English page saying that's the English page, it won't work. So if the return link is not there, it will just not work. The problem with missing return links, this is an error that you could also get in Google Search Console for your hreflang implementation. If you're missing that return link, Google will give you an error for that. But If it has spidered the English version and it has not spidered the German version yet, but has an old cache of that German version, it will say that the return link is missing because it hasn't spidered the German version yet. So when you do an hreflang implementation, be ready to see a ton of errors in Google Search Console at first, and then slowly see them go down over time as Google re-spiders all those pages. Another thing that we see fairly often is people using the wrong country or region code. So these are pretty strict ISO specs that you need to follow. And the first bit is the language in ISO 639-1 format. This is actually fairly hard because there are quite a few languages out there that don't have an ISO 639-1 code because, well, it's only 2 letters and there's more languages than that, so this goes wrong. But unfortunately, this is all the spec supports at this point. We actually run into this on WordPress.org, which I'm pretty familiar with, as you can probably imagine. I have been helping them with their hreflang setup. And one of the issues we have there is that most of the languages, or a lot of the languages that we serve there, don't have a 639-1 code. They only have a 639-3 code, which means that it's a 3-letter language designator, but Google doesn't support those, so, well, yeah, it just breaks. The second bit of the hreflang bit is the region. This goes wrong all the time. People will add the region when they don't need it, etc. When I first was checking into these about a year ago, I saw this on Ferrari's homepage, which basically meant that if you were searching in Spanish, you would get the English version of the page, even though they have a Spanish version of the page, but they're only targeting at Spain. They were also overdoing it slightly because they had all of these meta tags on their homepage and basically saying that they had an English version for every country instead of having just one English version that was the same for everyone. So this leads to a lot of bloat. And I mean, this is funny when you look at it in the beginning. This is their Polish English page, and this is the Greek English page that they had at that point. They've since fixed it, I noticed just now. But do you see any differences? Well, maybe you shouldn't have the 2 versions at that point. Another common issue that Google says that they have fixed, but that really shouldn't happen, is that people use en-uk instead of using en-gb. For as long as Great Britain is still Great Britain, en-gb is what you need to use. Another problem that they have a lot is canonical interference. So every page that has hreflang tags on it should also have a canonical on it. And that canonical should link to the same page as the hreflang tag for that page, so usually to itself. If it doesn't have that, then hreflang just stops working for that particular example. So in our first example, it would look something like this. So you'd have the 3 hreflang tags, and yes, the English tag would also have the hreflang tag for itself, and then it would also have a canonical that would point to itself. And the same goes for the German one here. You'd have the German page that links to itself as being German, and a canonical that links to itself, and the same would go for Dutch. So you'd have /nl for hreflang nl, and you'd have the canonical that points to /nl. This is really pretty stupid that you need all of this, but it really doesn't work without all of this. Now, another thing that I've seen happen is that it looks fine and people have like the right meta tags on the page. And then later on, you figure out that they also have an XML sitemap which has some hreflang markup. So make sure that you only pick one implementation and not multiple, and that not one of your pieces of software somewhere is adding hreflang to pieces that you really, really don't want it to be on. Now, if you think this is all a big pain in the ass and it looks really, really hard to do, that's true. But luckily, there are some really cool tools. And my good friend Aleda Solis did an awesome hreflang tag generator to easily generate the hreflang tags that you need for specific pages. This is really cool to use if you're testing whether your implementation is right and when you want to just make sure that you're seeing the right URLs and the right markup. So use that, the shortcodes there, you can just pick it up. The friends at the Media Flow in the UK have created a tool that actually allows you to create an XML sitemap with hreflang markup based on a simple CSV like this one. So you can send them this CSV through their tool, and they will send you back an XML sitemap with hreflang markup that just works. And that's really cool because, well, you can use that, or if you have a static site, or you could even use it to just test whether the implementation that you have in your current XML sitemap that one of your developers has done matches what you're getting from this tool. There's also a tool by Dejan out of Australia. He has a very cool tool to validate your hreflang markup. So you can throw a URL in there and hit validate, and then it will check all the hreflang tags on there. It will check whether all those pages that you're linking to link back. So it'll go through them slowly, and then it will show you like, okay, is your markup valid and is it working well? Now, one of the things that as an SEO can come in fairly easy is if you use this thing in your Chrome to actually realize that there are hreflang tags in the source. So, for instance, if you use that plugin and you go to Outbrain, you'll see that there's an hreflang tag on the page just by looking at your location bar. If you've done all this and you think you've got a working hreflang implementation, one of the most important things is that you need to keep on auditing. It doesn't just work, it works now. It will at some point break. So there are a lot of reasons that it can break. We've discussed a few already, but stuff that can happen afterwards. Pages that are redirected, but hreflang wasn't updated. Pages that have been deleted in one language, but not in others. Or a developer that thought he was smart and this can be done so much simpler and just breaks it all. So you have to really, really, really do regular audits. So if you have a continuous integration system for your company, add hreflang tests. This is harder than it looks like for most people, but add some simple tests to just check if your hreflang is there when you're retesting stuff on staging for your site. Or use Screaming Frog, which is one of my favorite tools, and manually with Screaming Frog, go through that site and test whether there's hreflang where there should be. That is also very, very important that the code that generates hreflang, if you're talking to developers, that you get them to make sure that the code that generates it has documentation that explains why. It points to documentation on the how of what they did, explains all the special cases, explains the relationship to canonical, and most importantly, it should probably also have your contact details in the code. So if someone wants to touch that code, that they can actually contact you. So doing all these things together will keep your hreflang happy. And I know how tough it is because I've done like 10 implementations now on larger sites, and I think like 3 of them are fully working. And well, if I can do it, you can do it, but keep on working. And with that, it's time for questions.
Awesome, Joost. Thank you for the great presentation. And we have questions coming in, guys. If you have more questions, just keep them coming in, and then I'll just ask them as they come in. Okay, the first question is my favorite. It's just, do you have any regrets in your entire SEO career?
Dozens.
Dozens?
Oh yeah, no, I have tons of regrets. Funnily enough, I've always been almost boringly white hat. So there's very few things that I have done that that I regret in the sense of and having been punished by Google or stuff like that. I think that the biggest regret I've had for so many things is that I didn't take the chance to rank for a lot more keywords back when it was so incredibly easy. So that some of the stuff that I had to work hard for later on to rank for it, where it could have been a lot easier if I just would have dove in like 8-9 years ago. So yeah, that's probably the most important one.
Awesome. Hold on one second. I just want to know if we have time for more questions, because we're at the top of the hour, but I really want to get these questions in, so bear with me. All right, so let me just ask you a few questions because we're at the top of the hour here. So let me look at some of the most important ones. Here's a really interesting question that I have. So I believe it's Scott. He was asking, have you ever known about an issue with the tag? The issue is his developers aren't closing their ending. Hold on, let me go through the. I apologize for that. Let me.
They're probably not closing their link tags like in XHTML.
Yeah, they're not closing the tag, the end bracket / bracket.
Yeah, it shouldn't.
And he wants to know if why his developer is doing that. He said if he closes the tag, it would cause issues.
It really depends on which type of HTML you're using, but it shouldn't matter to Google.
All right, Scott. So Scott, I hope that and answered your question. So please close the href tag at the end. It shouldn't matter, but it depends. Okay, so the next question is coming in. What would you put on your checklist? So if you have a checklist, when you're creating content, what would you put on that checklist to make sure that it ranks regardless of the language? So is there any like bulleted items that you have?
Well, first of all, if it needs to rank, it needs to be decent content.
All right.
So just well-written, decent content, well optimized for for the specific keywords for those markets. One of the things that's very important when you're talking about these things is that you really can't translate keywords. So you have to figure out, get someone who's local to that market and then get the right keywords, because people that translate keywords are the ones that lose all the time. So well-written content optimized for that local market and really fitting that niche. So for important content, that usually means rewriting it specifically for languages, if there's any, and regions, because there's far too much regional and language variation to do that, to just translate it. So a lot of that stuff just needs rewriting all the time.
Awesome. Beck, following up with this, wants to know, is there a language based on your experience that's the hardest to translate, or would you just rewrite it by a native speaker? The complete
one of the sites I did a lot of work like this on was on student.com, and what we just did was put out a creative brief to writers in all the languages that we supported, and had them write their own content specifically for that language. So we didn't translate, we really resourced it.
Awesome. So here's another question regarding plugins. So somebody wants to know if you're familiar with WPML. So I think there's a plugin in WordPress multi-language plugin, and its ability, your opinion on its ability to handle duplicate pages in WordPress.
I don't know it well enough to talk about that. To be honest, we're switching to a multilingual site on yoast.com ourselves. And we're on WordPress, of course, but we're using multilingual press to do that. We've looked at WPML, but we decided to use multilingual press because it's a lot cleaner.
Awesome. So guys, I'm going to put this in the chat, a link for you, so you have that. Let's see if there's any other questions that I could ask that are important. Okay, so somebody has an e-commerce website and they're targeting sales, so the US region only, and they want to know if it's important for them or if it's necessary to create multiple multi-language versions, even though they're only for the US region.
Well, if you're in the US, then 80% of your country speaks English, but there's this other 20% of your country that speaks Spanish.
Right.
So depending on the type of product that you sell, I would probably recommend that you do indeed set up a Spanish site and target it to the US, because you might be losing a lot of traffic if you're not doing that.
Awesome. Let's see, what if some of your content is translated? I think we answered that. Okay, does the X default, does it need to be put on every single page that contains the href
that's optional. You can put that, but you don't have to.
All right, guys. So I think we're going to be wrapping up right here. I hope everyone enjoyed the session. Up next, we have our very own president of SCM Rush. Her name is Marina Hrdovich, and she's going to be going into mobile domination. So if you guys want to rank on mobile, stay tuned. And once again, Yost, thank you so much for the session. Can you mention that plugin that you just mentioned a moment ago? I want to put it in the chat for everyone.
Multilingual Press.
It's Multilingual Press.
It's German, actually, because all the good multilingual stuff comes out of Europe.
All right. I just want to make sure, because I promised everyone and I have to do it. So guys, Multilingual Press, if you go to WordPress into the plugin section, you should be able to download it. I'm looking at it right now. Thank you for that. And that's it. So thank you and take care. Thank you. Awesome.
Goodbye. Thank you. Bye-bye.